welcome to the Open Era Podcast, episode number 200. Simon, we did it. Sir, how are you? How are you feeling? Episode 200. I don't know if this is actually your 200th episode. It probably isn't. We've probably done a few more than those, to be honest, Simon, with the special eps and all that. But 200, man. What a ride.
Sorry, Dev, I can't hear you over the noise of the British crowd, like drowning out this podcast.
Dylan, please, can you help us get the sound down? I don't know how many lagers they've consumed. Probably enough to take out an entire city the size of Malaga. But yeah, no, 200, sir. The Brits are going nuts.
But losing, I think, is the most important thing to highlight here as well.
But losing. We'll get to Davis Cup. We'll talk about Italy doing the thing. I hope that's not offensive, but Italy doing the thing in Malaga, winning the Davis Cup thanks to the heroics of Jannik Sinner. We'll get to that. We'll get to Novak Djokovic, talking about the Brits and Novak as well, having an interesting end to the season, get to some Boris Becker quotes, which are always fun, and then the big news from John Wertheim dropping as we record on Sunday about some chatter, quote unquote, including the Slams acquiring the 10 biggest events and forming a super tour that would include Saudi Arabia getting an event, and the ATP and WTA left to pick up the pieces, aka run the 500 events and the year-end finals. So that's a huge bombshell. We'll get to that in parting shots. But first, Simon, Davis Cup. I tried to gauge your interest this week about Davis Cup when I told you what time we would likely have to record on Sunday, because I was thinking Canada was going to make a run. It wasn't meant to be, but I was locked in for this, and you know I'm a hater, and I've been hating on Gerard Piqué and what they've done to this tournament. But I think this week was as close as we've gotten since they destroyed Davis Cup to what it kind of used to be. And for that, I mean, the home team doing quite well was a big part of that, but I think some of the away support surprised me, including Finland, who traveled really well. So I wanted to hate this week, but I found myself getting locked in, especially when Canada is playing Finland, and then for the rest of the week. But I'm curious how you felt this Davis Cup went down. I
mean, firstly, thank you to everyone for 200 episodes. I know I cut it off with a level of sarcasm in the opening, as you asked me in the opening question, but in general, amazing. I can't believe we made it to 200, Dev. Astonishing, really.
Crazy.
So many years, so much tennis, and yet it still continues, everyone. On the flip side, wait, Davis Cup happened this week, Dev?
Yeah.
Really?
See, hater. I'm trying to grow and be different and get beyond my long-held prejudices, including this entire event. So you can't even find the scores normally. It's like finding a treasure hunt to locate what is happening where and when, but really, nothing caught your eye, not even the beef, quote unquote.
I watched enough of it to be prepared to come on here and not sound like an idiot, is what I will say about the Davis Cup. I watched enough of the Davis Cup and followed it enough to be professional enough to record a podcast with you. And hopefully...
I mean, honestly, that's the least you can do, and we love you for it. And to get into the actual tennis part, Italy wins, Simon, and I do think it is worth talking about this generation of players they have. Jannik Sinner is the top, and he is the class of Italian tennis. And I think at 22, we saw him make the leap of leaps that you expected him to make for a while. Charlie Alcaraz talking about him going to number one day. It did seem like friendly banter between friends and pumping up your mate, as they say. But also, Simon, I think the last few weeks convinced anyone else who might be a holdout that he is definitely going to do this. It's like I made that comparison to Felix last week, I think, and Josh rightfully pointed out on the Discord, like, this is definitely different, right? Like the combination of shots, the ability to ramp it up when he needed to beat Novak Djokovic twice in one day, in back-to-back weeks to beat him, something I think only 3 other players have done. It's pretty mad.
It's insane, isn't it? It's nice to see him growing before our eyes into the player that I think we all thought he could be when he first arrived on the scene. And one thing you didn't say in that long list of superlatives is his movement. He's one of the best movers, I think, to ever grace the tennis court. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but he's astonishing. His lateral movement is amazing. He looks so graceful out on a tennis court. His ability to defend going side to side. And I think he's made some small technical changes to his game. Obviously, the serve is the most prominent thing that he's flip-flopped, gone back and forth to all the different stances you can possibly do. I'm surprised he's not thrown in an underarm serve at some point over the last 2 years with all the ways that he's trying to tinker with it. But at the same time, I think the biggest thing for me is his confidence level and his brain as well, because tactically, I think he's playing much smarter tennis now. And you can tell that I think some changes in the camp have held him. And then that belief to get across the line. You don't beat Novak Djokovic if you're a bad tennis player. And I think to do it as many times as he has done in the last 11 days goes to show he's really, really special, and he's going to be really good for a long time. And I think that base, that floor that he has is just so high. He's gonna be around at the top of the tour for a very long time, because you just can't imagine that floor dipping a huge amount, Dev.
No, I don't think he needs to do this, but if Darren Cahill needed to make an Instagram reel mix of his coaching abilities to present his abilities to maybe a future client, what a reel he could show from what he's done with Jannik Sinner and things on the court and off of it as well. But I think the on the court things, I mean, the things we're watching him do, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, Alex de Minaur, he owns Alex de Minaur, and I feel like this matchup is just obviously not good for the Demon. But it was pretty unnerving to see him hit past someone who is almost impossible to hit past. For some of the game's best players, one of the best defensive players on the tour, and it was no issue at all for someone who has played a ton of tennis, a ton of pressure-packed tennis, obviously not being at home so much, maybe easing some of the burden, but it's a Davis Cup tie. It's for your country. I mentioned the other players, Simon Berrettini, hurt, not a part of this crew, but Arnaldi, the guy who won the first match against Popyrin, which was huge. I think whoever won that match, you're probably looking at that team being the favorite because Australia was so good at the doubles, Simon. But that match was insane. Arnaldi not playing super well, but finding a way, grinding it out. Some Italy at the Euros kind of stuff, Simon, to do another soccer analogy, but finding a way. Lorenzo Musetti, who didn't have his best stuff here either this week, maybe, is only 21. There's 5 other Italians in the top 200 under 22. That's pretty nuts, man. They're probably going to be winning the Davis Cup or whatever the hell it's called going forward a few more times.
Almost certainly, right? Like the level of depth that they have is astonishing. Does that make Max Purcell like Bukayo Saka in this situation or something like that? I don't know how you would try and phrase this horrible metaphor to make it work here.
That doesn't work at all. And in fact, I think you shoehorned an Arsenal player in just to jab me. So I will parry it and move on. But I did feel for the Demon, Bush. Quickly, I said this a few times on the pod, but like I watched him in person a couple of months ago, and I really appreciate what he brings to the court, his tenacity, his commitment. But you can see it when a player just doesn't have the weapons to compete against someone at Sinner's level. And I don't know if that's ever going to be a thing for Demon. It probably won't be. And he's had a marvelous career even without it. But you did see that there's levels to this. There's
levels, and there's also I think belief going into the match, especially when you have the record that he does.
He had none.
And I actually thought there would be a bit of a leveler here, being a Davis Cup tie. And I know the Italian fans were incredible, and they traveled well. Obviously, it was very close for them as a nation and as a fan group to make it there. But I thought the Australians made some good noise as well, and I thought they made themselves heard in this final. The weapons thing is it does demonstrate, doesn't it, how hard Jannik Sinner hits the ball and his ability to generate pace. He's the one of, if not the cleanest ball strikers I've ever seen in my life. And I know I'm throwing so much hyperbole around in this episode, but I think there's also the belief, and just trying to give you some guidance of why I think this is the best era of tennis ever. Like, just, this is the belief that I hold, obviously, just on the basis that it's the most technologically advanced, the players have the best access to data and information, it's the most professional ever. So for him to be able to strike a tennis ball the way that he does and hit through players who are inside of the world's top 20 in the way that he does is remarkable. It really is remarkable. I actually thought the Novak Djokovic Jannik Sinner match gave us a pretty good indication of what it's going to be like in Australia. There's a quick court. It wasn't actually surprisingly quick court indoors. And I think we're going to see a dynamite match between those two if it happens in Melbourne Park. I really can't wait for it to happen.
Novak had 3 match points against Sinner. Sinner was serving at 4-5, love 40. Boy, oh boy, you're talking about stress. And do you have it? Do you have it against the GOAT? Do you have it in this situation in which Novak is obviously, he's going to bring it, but for Serbia, he's bringing extra. That was nuts. That was absolutely nuts. Incredible spectacle. And yeah, I mean, it worked out because you had this commitment from the players, and I think Jannik and Novak turning around from the ATP Tour Finals and coming down to Malaga and putting it on the line like this. It added to this situation, and it made it what it was, which was really good theater and an excellent week for a maligned tournament, which we'll probably continue to shit on as we go on in our year in review. But it was great. It was great theater. Congrats to Italy once again. The other players to beat Novak in consecutive weeks, Simon. Andy Murray, Rafa Nadal, but Mikhail Yushny stand up. The head basher himself. Love it.
I knew he was going to appear in this list. I was trying to genuinely remember when this happened. I seem to have blocked this from my memory. Amazing that he did it, though. I mean, we can touch on Yushny, but I think maybe just to stay on Sinner for a second. I think it's quite surprising to see Novak Djokovic hurried sometimes, or to make some of the errors that he did in these matches. And I think both players were probably quite shagged as well, given what's happened. But I think they were both equally as shagged as well. I don't think one player was more tired than the other. Potentially, you could make the case of Djokovic, just the age and all that stuff, but it's not seemed to stop him, or he hasn't looked particularly old in the last few months, has he, given his results? But it's just the testament to how good of a player and how good of a ball striker Sinner is that he does hurry him. He does force him to hit shots that sometimes you think are a little surprising. And one of the big tactical things that I was going to bring up here is that sort of backhand to backhand rally that Djokovic has been so good at for so many years. It's just pinning people on that side. There's been a bit of a sea change this year, and you've seen the way that both Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner have tried to step around that forehand, not get pinned into that corner in the way that Djokovic has been able to do with so many players, and not allow him to sort of dictate off that side. And I thought Sinner did a really good job, especially in that first set, of just any sort of rally ball that's slightly short on that backhand side. No, I'm going to step around it and I'm going to fucking crush it to both sides to keep him guessing. And I think that's like something telling to keep an eye on for the 2024 season, is like whether people A, have the weapons to do it, and B, have the sort of guts to do it, because it does take a bit of balls to step around that side against somebody with the best backhand of all time. I saw
this sentiment on X a few times during the final.
Please don't.
I know, but for Sinner and Alcaraz and Holger Rune and whoever else is coming up now, like if you're getting a chance to play Novak and you can be actually in the conversation and have this experience to challenge him, how valuable is that? Like, you can't actually measure that. I feel like it's really, really special for them. So it's Jannik's world.
I think it's worth just pointing out here as well is the three players that you mentioned, and obviously you would throw in Dani Medvedev as well. It's not a given at this point, is it not, to say Novak Djokovic is going to walk into a match against any of the four of them and win? You do have to stop and think about it for a second.
Yeah.
Like, we're not at the stage now where he's all dominant and all powerful.
At a slam, though. At a slam? Wait, at a slam, though, are you that... at a slam, I think the conversation is still lopsided until next year, when I'm proven otherwise. Dude won 3. Dude was in every slam final and should have probably won all of them.
I agree. Let's move on.
Quickly on Novak. The fans thing, the British fans thing. Did you make anything of that, Simon? Novak suggesting, quote, British fans should, quote, learn how to show respect before telling them to, quote, shut up. The British fans were boorish and loaded up to the gills with alcohol and yelling at several points, including when he was trying to do his post-match interview. So I kind of get it. That being said, like, this is the whole thing. It's Davis Cup. The crowd, the atmosphere, that's what they want. The organizers want this. But I found it interesting that Novak, who could have played for Britain in an alternate timeline, like we've discussed, was yelling at his potential countrymen.
We also didn't touch on the fact that this was actually a political event almost for Novak Djokovic, right? Like he had the eyes of Serbia on him, with eyes to being prime minister, president one day. He actually has to bring it in this tournament, does he not? Representing his nation. Anyway,
it matters a lot. You could tell, obviously. And there was the doping control. I don't know if you saw this, but he refused a doping test before the quarterfinals. Marca, a Spanish tabloid, not the most reputable, I will say that, as someone who follows soccer transfer rumors, or used to, with a horrible magnifying glass, but not the most reputable source, I would say. But Novak refusing a doping test. They can give you less notice for when they test you, apparently, Simon, in this setting, in this Davis Cup setting. And Novak was furious because he goes through his regular pre-match ritual stuff. But in his defense, and I know, have I become a Novak stan? No, yes. But I will say, to draw someone's blood before a match, I could see how that might not like make you feel like you're at your best physically. No?
Level playing field for everyone, Dev.
I know, but still. In any case, I did find it hilarious that in the same article at the very end, it's like Serbia's current captain, Viktor Troicki, was banned for 18 months for refusing to provide a blood sample in the same article.
Yeah. There's, you know how a few months ago when we were talking about Simona Halep, and we were like, yeah, doping's probably rife in the sport. It's just like, it's an open secret. I will refer you back to my opinions on that one.
I don't know if Carol Bouchard intentionally added that line at the end, but chef's kiss, it was fantastic. And he is the current captain, Viktor Troicki, so it makes sense to mention that. But terrific. Finally, Simon, before we get to parting shots, I don't know if you saw this, Boris Becker back in the news. He's Holger Rune's coach or part of his team. He's talking about the season or the tour, and Holger Rune is back from his bad period. But did you see what he said about Alcaraz?
I did. Yeah.
Thought it was a bit harsh, but basically saying that Zverev stepped up, which I mean, okay, Daniel Medvedev found his form. Jannik Sinner took a huge step forward, but Alcaraz seemingly didn't. Why is that? Dueling with Novak, winning Wimbledon. It's the most difficult thing is to maintain your level. Anyone could have a good tournament or a good year from time to time, but maintaining that level over the years is the real challenge. The locker room never sleeps. It means that other players will realize how you have to play against Alcaraz to have a chance against him. That's what's happened. Other players have developed, and Alcaraz hasn't. Very harsh from Boris Becker here. Simon?
Yeah, this is clickbait. I think this is someone obviously looking for relevance. Let's just have a quick look here. Yes, that's right. He did end the year as world number 2. Yeah. He won a Grand Slam. Yeah, that's right. How many Masters did he win this year? 3, is that right? 3. Yeah, I think it's probably a fairly good year. All joking aside on this one, Dev, I think there's some interesting parallels in terms of looking at, and not just because it's a cheap parallel here, but just looking at the way that Iga Swiatek sort of tried to find herself again after winning that first Grand Slam in Paris. And I know there's slightly different circumstances, but how you sort of have to adjust as someone who is being hunted every single week, and how difficult it is to kind of climb that mountain again once you overcome it once. And so many players are like, oh, I took a set off Novak Djokovic. Goodness me, yeah. Like I feel so good about myself. Yeah. Imagine how it feels when you beat him in a Grand Slam final, just trying to find yourself. You've done everything, and you need to remotivate yourself and find something to keep going on it. I think that's kind of where we are with Carlos Alcaraz as well.
And in Boris's defense, I think that's kind of what he meant. Like he said this on a podcast. So I think in print it sounds possibly more damning than how he offered it, because he said it out loud. But I can kind of get what he's getting at, so to speak. But it's only because, what stood out to me is when he mentioned how fast the courts were at the ATP finals, and like said they were too fast almost, which not a red flag, but I was like, okay. Like generally as a spectator, I love that. But like why for Carlos would that not be a great thing? But I wonder if I was just reading too much into hey, why doesn't he like this style that's more suitable for the fan experience or for better tennis where his peers are adapting better? Why can't he adapt as well?
No, fair enough. Just going to do a quick, I just looked this up because I wanted to make the point on the podcast. So his 2023 season, win final, win semi, win, semi, win, quarter, final, semi, second round. Oof, goodness me. Semi-final. That was in Paris, right?
Okay, yeah.
Where he lost to Sappelin.
Right.
I think that's probably okay, isn't it? Seems okay.
It's fine. And yeah, the expected now he's measured against a crazy bar, right? Because he's chasing just insane numbers. Because I think the other thing Novak is, I mean, all of these guys have done is the bar is so high. Like if you want to be one of the greats, quote unquote, in tennis going forward, holy hell, the numbers thing is going to be a bit of a thing on your back for a while. But
you can't win everything, Dev.
No, and it doesn't matter. Realistically, it doesn't matter. Like it's not. That's not the point, really. In the end, I don't think it is. And maybe in the sense that it's an impossible number to reach, it won't have to be the topic of every damn conversation, which is honestly refreshing because it's been a while.
You lose a lot in tennis. And I think that's one of the things that's difficult to adjust when you're a pro and coming up as a kid is that you spend so much time losing. We've had this ridiculous run of all-time great players on both the men's and the women's side that people have become accustomed to just seeing someone dominate and win every single match they go into. It just doesn't feel like that's going to be the case moving forward. Like the separation required to be just so much better than head and field above the rest is I can't see that being the case over the next 10 years. He's going to lose a lot, and that's fine. He's also going to win a significant amount of matches, and I think we need to celebrate that as well.
It's well said, sir. All right, we'll leave it there. When we come back after the break, parting shots, we'll get to that Super League bombshell from John Wertheim, new TV deal for the WTA, Carlos Alcaraz in chess, next-gen finals, all of that coming up next. Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. Simon, parting shots. A lot of news this week. Spicy news. Let's talk about the Super Tour chatter, quote unquote. This is the tweet from John Wertheim. Quote, for what it's worth, hearing more chatter about the slams joining to acquire 10 biggest events, forming a Super Tour, brackets with Saudi Arabia getting 10th event, leaving ATP and WTA to run 500s and year-end finals. A lot of hurdles to clear, but this would be the proverbial game changer. Stay tuned. He followed that up, Simon, saying the way this has been viewed by the decision makers is sort of a reset for tennis as they survey the landscape in the sports world, including the North American sports world, where they're seeing other leagues sign TV deals. He mentioned the NWSL, the Women's Soccer League in North America, as a kind of a goalpost for them because they just signed a rights deal. What are your thoughts, Simon? I mean, on the surface, doesn't feel great.
This is huge news, by the way. And in terms of all the things that we've ever covered on this podcast, for the actual structural foundations of tennis itself, this has got to be one of the biggest things we've ever covered if it actually happens. There's a ton of stuff that's happened since we've done this podcast on a sort of political and cultural level, and I'm not kind of just playing that down, but this from an actual foundational level is enormous if it does go through and is the way that it's written. I wrote in our Discord that I did not have the Grand Slams taking over the slicing off a bigger piece of the pie on my bingo card. And I think looking back at it now, that seems pretty naive on my behalf. I think if you were looking at this through the long lens of history, this actually feels quite obvious. Does that make sense? It kind of feels like if we were so worried about Saudi Arabia and oil money state and all that sort of stuff coming in and someone trying to, carve off their own section of the tour, there's already these four massive players who are outsized in terms of their stature and in terms of their power. Wouldn't it make sense for them just to take it on board? And I'm not arguing one way or another on that. I'm just saying that seems obvious to me. Like, this seems duh. Like, why wouldn't this have happened? On the flip side, I'm not opposed to this on the basis that I don't think tennis works the way it is. And I think if we're going to see some change here, I'm curious to know what actually happens after this runs for a year or 2 or 3. I don't like the inclusion of Saudi state money on this at all.
Yeah.
But I think if this gives bigger stature to the WTA and actually sort of from the ground up breaks the structural hold that these institutions have, I'm not opposed to it. I don't think this is going to be good in the long run, but I think that might be in the short run a reasonable thing to shake up the tour.
I'm of two minds. Like when I see things like we need an F1 model, any dreams of maybe moving the sport towards a maybe more open and welcome and environmentally friendly way is just not happening, and it's against fully the capitalist model. So I'm removing that pipe dream for a second just to say like none of these tours are making money, and like especially the WTA is in a real pickle financially, and we saw that with how the boondoggle played out with the WTA finals. But I think you're right in the sense that like when you look at it laid out like this, it seems really obvious, and it makes sense that the slams, which have an outsized level of importance in the wider media landscape in terms of the fan recognition. If you're maybe an average tennis fan, you definitely know about the slams, full stop. So I think this does allow for them to maybe start over and try and make some cash, which we know is the end game here. And if you do have a unified players outfit, be it the PTPA or whoever else, to negotiate with them or work with them, I think that's good. But I guess I do wonder, it does remind me a bit of the Super League in the sense that like the halves and the top players will be taken care of. And in that Super League, it was the big clubs who will be taken care of. But I'm looking at the rankings today and seeing events are still taking place all over the world, including players who need to play to get by, players not too far out of the 100s, Simon, like players in the 110s and 120s. What happens to them with this, right? Like I guess the idea is like, what does this actually look like? Who's in charge? What does it mean? Is it a merger? Is it a whole new thing put together? Yeah, obviously we don't know a lot, but I think this reminds me a bit of the Super League that they tried in soccer.
I agree with you. I think fundamentally this does not go well for players ranked outside of the top 100. I think this is a terrible changing situation.
This is going to be a litmus test for the PTPA. Totally. It really was.
And I think that's kind of where I'm coming at it from this perspective, which is that if you have this sort of structural change, it's up to your labor body to actually fight for you and make sure that money is distributed throughout the tour, because it sure as shit doesn't feel like that's going to happen here. Like not with a sort of fledgling union that's maybe Stan Wawrinka has some opinions on about it. But I think if this money was to ever actually be distributed across the tour in general, this could be positive. I just have very little faith that will happen. So you will get a situation where you have a lot of very, very well compensated people and players and a power structure which is very, very focused on the top, and probably a very, very small number of people, which I don't think is probably good for the game in general. All that being said, Dev, tennis is such a mess. Could you equally see this flaming out inside of 2 years? I could equally see that. But I guess the Grand Slams
or never starting. Yeah. Or
yeah,
never
that's
starting.
the thing.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting. It's Wertheim who's talking about this. Like, it does feel like there's been so much smoke, and how disastrous the WTA finals went. I don't think it's now it's more like, okay, we've tried the noble act. We've tried this goes against our values thing, and we're not sure about this too. We're a bit of a joke right now in terms of our execution of events. How do we make ourselves legitimate once again and not embarrass our players who don't deserve this stuff? Like, we have Chris Everett tweeting on the day of the Davis Cup finals saying, my wish for next year is having a legitimate WTA finals where our players are celebrated. It's like, okay, like, what are we protecting here? Not much. The system is bad. It's terrible.
Well, like, just putting this alongside the sort of new TV deal that you have on the WTA side, and also the profit sharing stuff. We didn't talk about it because it happened while we were taking a small break. But how does that get incorporated within this program? Because I think it is interesting that if, again, you take the long lens of history and sort of take a step back from everything, it's not really a surprise that a bunch of these programs came into being as soon as the PTPA mysteriously showed up, right? Oh, shockingly enough, we start to see, the ATP start to think about potentially doing some programs that might benefit the players. Does that all go up in smoke with this? I don't know, man. Like, it's super interesting. And I think it's one of those, I mean, I said at the top, right, that I think this is one of the biggest structural changes that could happen in tennis. I don't have any clue how this plays out, other than like to compare it to other situations, which is that poor people tend to get fucked and the rich tend to do really well out of it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, Easy Ace Machine, friend of the show on Discord, makes a good point. Like at the current state where we're going with tennis is a slowish death where we're going into exhibition only fiefdoms
which I agree with, by the way. I think that is legitimately a good point. Like it's dying before our eyes. Certainly the WTA is. Unless you're going to start taking, directly money from oil barons and from, the worst of the worst. Like, I think that is legitimately a fair point to make.
Do you think that announcement about the new WTA television deal with Sky and Canal Plus, do you think it's kind of weird that the ATP is mentioned so heavily in that release?
What's going on? Like, I know none of these organizations talk to each other, but like, these are two massive announcements that got made with the profit sharing stuff and also this new TV deal. How does this get incorporated? Did they sign a deal just for like a bunch of 10 500 tournaments? Is that what's going on here? Like,
they're buying them by round. It's like, yeah, I'll take the quarterfinals of Rome. It's for $20. Final offer.
It's astonishing. Like, imagine showing up to have a rights discussion with in the footballing world, and you're like, I mean, this league might not exist in like next year.
It's fine. Listen, it's fine. Can we sell ads against this? What is our inventory?
The FA Cup might not exist, so you can buy the package, but like by the quarterfinal stage, it might not be there anymore.
So yeah, that's good stuff.
What a random situation to follow a sport dying and also trying to figure out ways of resuscitate itself. And I actually think canary in the coal mine situation, just given the state of the global financial situation, given the bond market, and given the state of all of like both public finances and the state of a lot of like private companies as well, who have over leveraged on got drunk on cheap money, who are now paying the price for it. Is this going to be a situation that goes into other sports as well? Are we going to start seeing other organizations fall apart?
Well, there's a huge television issue in North America with all the regional sports networks going under and declaring bankruptcy. So yeah, I mean, yes is the answer. The way sports are consumed, or like the way we watch, has already changed so significantly. But I do wonder what happens when some of these companies that popped up in the last 5 years go belly up really quickly when it seemed like this was the new age.
If we take into consideration that basically like the version of neoliberal capitalism exploded in 2008, right? Like that system, it failed, like it completely fell apart. And since that moment, we've resuscitated it using the heart defibrillator. And then we started putting Band-Aids on it all over the place. And it just kind of, things blew up all over the place and we kept putting Band-Aids on it. Maybe this is just tennis's version of it. The thing has been walking, has been a dead man walking for a long time. So let's see what happens after this.
Whew. All right, shall we move on? WTA stars on vacation.
So did you see this article?
I did. Yes, I did. It was
the WTA website trying to do a roundup of where all these players are going in their quote unquote off season. That's right.
It's in 4 hours. Yeah. 4 hours of time off.
I mean, it did lead me to ask the question of like, how long do these players actually get off before they're going to Australia and starting their preparation? It's probably not very long. And if it's 2 weeks, where would you go, Dev? Like at the end of a season in November before you're starting to go down to Australia and start hitting again? What would you do?
I think 2 weeks. I'd probably do South America. I think I'd do Chile or Peru. for 2 weeks, try and do that area, maybe dip down to Argentina.
So which player would you be? Let's have a look. If we're going to do some mid-2000s BuzzFeed.
I think the Maldives is a popular choice, I've noticed. Bali, of course. I think Caroline Garcia went to Antarctica, which is kind of cool. Not looking so hot up there, melting-wise. Saw some penguins, though, so that's positive. But overall, yikes. Overall, a lot of LA shots. You know what I found, Simon? And you tell me this. I feel like Brits especially, but Europeans love Los Angeles. Los Angeles is it. Is it due to the lack of sunlight?
Yes, I think so. I think it also gets glamorized as well, right? Is this
fair?
Incredible.
Every
place.
Brit I've known who's like gone to LA is like, mate, this is the greatest thing I've seen in my life. And I'm like, oh, because the sun is out for more than 26 minutes.
Talk about the places you could go in North America, especially in the United States. LA would not be close to the top of the list for me.
Getting out of the airport is long enough where you're like, this. But no, LA is good. I like LA, actually.
I enjoyed visiting it for E3. Like twice that I went and a couple of other times just for different work. I think if you're going for a convention, it's a way different kind of atmosphere, right? Like it's a fake place, but at a convention, good Lord, you're seeing a whole different side, right? That is a city which I think is basically unsavable from all of the infrastructure.
If my sister's listening, shouts to LA. I think LA is good. I like LA, but I feel like people who visit LA make it worse by what they think it is. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you take into consideration that we're trying to undo all of the urban planning from the 1940s onwards, I don't think LA's making huge strides in doing that, right? It's not a particularly walkable place. Not a particularly green place either.
What's your pick for where'd you go?
I thought about this long and hard, and I sort of settled on, I think I'm just an autumn person in general. So I would try and find somewhere that has a late autumn season. I kind of like some of the shots that I saw of Madison Keys. Just a bit of I like just like a nice jacket, a nice walk in some leafy forest somewhere.
You're in your shacket era? Is that what you're saying? Your shacket era? Oh my God.
What the hell has happened to me? Can I find a demonstration of more 30-year-old version of me?
Pumpkin spice hair shampoo utilized? Yeah, that's disgusting. Carlos Alcaraz, I've been playing chess. What a world.
Didn't know he was such a chess fan.
Well, Luke, friend of the show, Luke on the Discord, there's a chess bot you can play against Carlos Alcaraz AI in which he's telling you about stuff you don't want to talk about while you're playing chess. He's like, did you know Wimbledon's sick? It's like, hey, I guess you would say that, but also play your next move, sir.
See, as he plays them. Yeah, exactly.
Bravo.
I have very little to say about this story, other than it's kind of cool that he's playing chess.
Listen, this is marketing, baby. This is how you get.
This is
kind of target the chess market. The chess market. We are missing the chess people.
I'd love to talk to Luke about this.
We need more chess boys on tennis. Are you kidding me?
It's like we need more bought license plates in the gift shop. We need more chess fans.
We are missing out on the chess demographic, 18 to 35. God damn.
I think this is a conversation that I need to have with Luke at some point. Is the chess demographic wealthy? Do we actually want to attract them into the sport?
We'll have a whole episode. We'll see. Damn it. Because I'm obsessed with this now. Okay. Profit share Q&A. We missed this, Simon, but definitely up our alley.
Yeah, it's enormous. And I recommend actually going and looking at the ATP website because they... Like, is this all redundant, though? Like, I don't know. Like, what is the world that we're living in at this point?
There's a asterisk that says MBS will decide to tank this if he wants. So.
I mean, that's the other thing that we didn't mention about that opening segment is how involved, like, who's running it? Like, which figure or which?
Yeah.
Anyway, where's the money coming from that perspective? So this is a good article, like, because it's dealing with all of the quote unquote one vision strategic plan, which again is quite shady in terms of.
Isn't that what the Saudis called their what's going on here? Did they take the branding too?
Yes, and a lot of it here is fluff. But one of the things that I thought was interesting in the middle of the article was it was basically talking about how. The media revenue that tennis gets is exceptionally low. I can't remember the language they used. They used something that I looked at and thought, the fuck are you saying that in public for? Again, because it was like, I think it was like media revenue is low in comparison to other sports, which is like one of the most honest truths I think I've ever seen from the ATP.
We down bad. Please help us.
we don't know what we're doing. We're trying nothing and we're all out of ideas.
I'm imagining a Watson IBM robot saying this, the computer being like, when I'm not contabulating service speed, I do our profit reports.
We have solely targeted people who watch
Just Force
cable television, who are in the 60 to 90 demographic and have tried nothing else.
Very interesting. No, yeah, there's a lot of information here that I do find eye-opening. But yeah, I mean, good. The transparency is good, but also, wow, no wonder this deal is happening potentially to shake it all up.
I thought it was a fascinating read. I really did. Like, if you're a proper nerd when it comes to the tour or understand the supposed changes that are coming to it, I thought it was one of the more interesting things that I've seen in a long time.
If you're Googling, it's 50-50 profit sharing formula Q&A on the ATPtour.com website. So yeah, check that out. Published November 7th. A lot of info in there. Could be all moot though once this new deal, once the chatter develops into something else. Speaking of Saudi Arabia, Simon, we end with the Next Gen Finals. I mentioned there's a bunch of challenger events going on all over the world, but in terms of the ATP, the last thing, so-called thing on the calendar, the Next Gen Finals in Saudi Arabia.
I'll ask you a question about this, Dev. So we were in Saudi Arabia for the Next Gen Finals. So there's a couple of parts to this. There's obviously like the state itself, so the government itself's record on human rights and the laws that it sort of, it's exclusionary, pick any number of isms that you want in terms of its record. And then there's also the money, and where does the money come from as well. I feel like it is worth saying off the top on this one that the Saudi people themselves, I feel like we don't have to say this, but like there's nothing against the Saudi people on this. No. And I feel like we need to make that abundantly clear.
None of them are in these photos either, I noticed from the website. There's no one from Saudi Arabia really around any of these guys as they do the tour in Jeddah. Isn't that a bit strange?
It is a little strange, yes.
Like there's no one around. There's no one there.
I make that point because of all the sort of feces thrown at Jordan Henderson, I think quite rightly so, is that we always talk like these organizations, these institutions do it to say like it's for the good of the people, right? We're spreading the game to a new corner of the world. And then Jordan Henderson's playing in front of like fucking 600 people. Like, so it's not spreading the game. It just isn't in that capacity.
Who has the access to this kind of stuff?
Who has the access and who benefits from this? I think that's the biggest thing that I'm curious to see what comes out of this Next Gen Finals, because this is, again, this is a really interesting litmus test for where tennis is going.
As always, they're trying some new rules at this event, which I think is the best thing they do for the Next Gen Finals, Simon. But some of these are very interesting. No on-court warm-up. Matches start immediately after the coin toss. A second serve shot clock, which will be 8 seconds between first and second serve. Novak, not Rafa, all these players are disqualified basically if this ever came in. Reduced time between points down from 25 to 15 seconds following an ace, double fault, or unreturned serve. Reduced changeovers, no change events after the first game. So those are the big ones, and then a whole lot of innovation, Simon. But I mean, this is all geared up at moving this stuff along, right, and making this faster. But I also feel like we're basically like, well, don't get injured, guys, because we're going to go way faster now. Good luck.
Again, I've said this before, right? Like it's the boomer marketing mentality, isn't it? All these kids, they just watch fucking TikToks.
Go
speed
faster.
it up.
Go way faster.
Whatever you do, speed it up.
Listen, if they had a sniper in the crowd with a red dot on someone, on a player going too slow, I wouldn't be surprised if that was an idea here. Because holy cow, like I get it. I get they want to make things faster, and UTS is getting at some of these things, but
two lads at the net. Okay, lads. Do one of you just want to call it a day, and we'll just say like the other guy won? How are you feeling today, Jannik?
Some of the other stuff: simplified scoreboard, reduced height umpire, chair height, which I find very interesting. I guess that's for like the fans behind.
How is that an innovation? Like, This is another one of those. We worked in departments. So just find something to pad out the PR statement.
Is that so that players losing their mind won't assault an umpire accidentally? Free fan movement, so I guess they can move around when points are going on, do whatever they want. So yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about this stuff?
It's a meaningless tournament. Do it. Sure, why not?
Might as well. Honestly, pray for all these kids. Bless these boys who will be subjected to these Hunger Games in the next gen finals.
Oh man, what a great idea! on the eve of the next one coming out, right? Or is it? It might be in theaters already, in the cinemas already. Good time as a tie-in. Think about it next year, people.
Arthur Fees, curious to watch him. Dominic Stricker, most punchable face in the game. We got going right now. He's a lovely lad.
Poor kid.
Alex Mickelson, think he'll be pretty good too.
Not a big fan of his dad, have to say.
Phil? Is it Phil Mickelson? No, it can't be. There's no way.
Who wins this tournament?
Probably Arthur Fields. King Arthur, as his friends call him, I believe.
How did you crush the earlier pronunciation in French and then call him Phils here?
King Arthur, because that's his new nickname going forward. That's why.
Phil himself.
Arthur, fill it up.
I think Van Ash wins this. I think.
Wow, okay. LVA.
We just can't call him his name.
I love how we just mentioned those guys and there's like 40 Italians also in this rally. They are coming, man.
Cobley's good as well. Like I think that kid's really talented. Keep an eye on him.
Awesome. Okay. We did a good job previewing that tournament, actually. I'm being serious. That was good stuff, Simon. Finally, 2 challenges remaining. What do you got, sir, this week?
Can I shout out the Lockpicking Lawyer channel on YouTube? Have you ever watched this?
I haven't. That sounds fascinating. Oh, what is it?
It is literally what it sounds like. It is a lawyer who picks locks.
Picking locks. Okay, gotcha.
If I can't sell this to you in the next 30 seconds, I'm doing a bad job.
But why? What is this? Like people are asking him to do it?
His big thing is basically like locks, mechanical, physical locks and security has not evolved in like 70 or 80 years. And the companies who are running it are pulling the wool over people's eyes by claiming that their stuff is more secure than it actually is. So his big thing is to demonstrate that any of the locks you're buying, Big Lock is keeping it under lock and key, all the secrets.
I always suspected them. Yes.
I always suspected them as well.
Okay. I'm going to check this out. Interesting.
I thought it was fascinating, especially I stumbled onto it, with In Search of a New Good Bike Lock. And the conclusion that I came away from it is if a thief wants your bike, they will get your bike, no matter what you think. So
it's terrifying. Okay.
Just think of your bike lock as one part of a wider package of security.
It's a healthy amount of fear mongering to leave our listeners with, Simon. Thank you very much for that. Listener, hold on to your bike at all costs. Mine is about Black Friday sale, Simon. You want a boomer take? Here's mine. It's not a sale on Black Friday if it's 25%. Get the hell out of here if you're offering a Black Friday sale for 25%. I saw 20%, Simon. What? Have you no shame? It's not a sale.
What do you classify as a sale then?
At least 40% on Black Friday. On quote unquote Cyber Monday. That's not a deal, 20%.
Can we continue this boomer take by saying Black Friday shouldn't have started 2 weeks ago either? Like what are we doing here?
It's all bad. We said that terrible football game happened called the Black Friday game. It's bad, man. It's bad.
Is there anything more North American than trying to shed a load of shit that you have overstocked on to a bunch of ravenous people? I love it so much.
A single tear emerges from my eye as I sing the American anthem. It's beautiful.
Did you buy anything on Black Friday, by the way, Dev?
I bought a backpack. Yeah.
Did you need a new backpack?
Yeah, I did.
What happened to your old one?
I bought it in Vancouver when I still lived there for $20 after my EA backpack was stolen at a restaurant.
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah. Do you remember that?
I do.
That bag that I bought for $20 lasted like 6 years. That's pretty good. That's pretty good ROI, as they say in the investment streets, right?
I feel like the one thing that I have of Vancouver on myself is a Herschel bag, which I've had for like 6 years now, and it's still going strong. It's faded considerably, but it's still going strong.
I love hearing stories like that. Reduce
Buy
your
it for
hope.
life, people.
Yeah, but reduce your hope in the world. Okay, let's leave it there. While I get sentimental about a pair of socks I had for 8 years that lasted. I'll miss you, socks. Okay. Join us on patreon.com/open era. Get the show early on Sundays. Get it ad-free. Plus, join us on the Discord where we're chatting tennis all the time. Shouts to my sister, Ermi, for joining the Discord most recently. I think she's been a long time Patreon member, but she has just joined the Discord, so that's cool. Sci Family Takeover, Simon. It's happening. We're also on twitter.com/X OpenAirPod. Every now and then, some tweets will come out, but yeah, what a terrible place that's become these days. Oof, not great.
Become.
Also fair. Simon was on the ground floor of this as well. And he was right.
I wrote a deck back. Just as an aside, before we close the episode, I wrote a deck back in 2017 saying that Twitter was a disaster and published it to a big company.
They didn't listen to the prophet. They turned their backs on him, and look where we are now. For producer Dylan on the ones and twos, and for Simon, thank you so much for listening to Open Era. We'll talk to you next week.